Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Dean Ginsberg. I'm Shuangye Chen from East China Normal University, and we're so happy to meet you here.
Yes, very exciting. It's a nice venue.
And please allow me to give a very brief introduction and a review of our GEDF, and then I will invite you to have a very brief introduction of your ideas, and then I think we will kick off this dialogue. Yeah. Dear audience,
I was going to say something about GEDF as well. If you want me, that's up to you. I don't have to say, but I can give a little background.
Yeah. So maybe we will have a different. I think we will touch GEDF from different aspects.
Very good.
Yeah. So I will just do the moderator's job. Okay. Dear audience, dear colleagues, dear students. You're very welcome to join this GEDF Global Education Deans Forum's new series of this Dean's Vision of Shared Education Futures. This is our first episode, so we are very happy to have Dean Rick Ginsberg from University of Kansas School of Education and Human Sciences.
Did she freeze up?
陈老师声音没了，掉线了呀，卡住了。
是不是声音
掉线了？
I'm afraid the internet is not very stable. We have to wait for a few moments.
Good.
Sorry for the
inconvenience. I was worried that was me and not me.
I guess
I'm trying to contact her.
I think Professor Chen will come back very soon. She will join the forum very soon.
Very good.
Yeah, so maybe we'd like to introduce our two other guests as well. And this is Associate Professor Zhu Gang from Faculty of Education, and that one is Dr. Shuangye Wang.
Yeah, I'm off the line for the technical reason. Yeah, so Chuya, you have already introduced our student, the faculty, and the Yashu. Yeah.
Yeah, just in the middle of the introduction, but you can also continue what you want to say. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, audience. Forgive me that I lost connection for a very short period, and Dean Rick Ginsberg and Dean Professor Dean Yuan Zhengguo are the two founding deans of this Global Education Deans Forum, and this launched in 2018, and then we have meet again in Shanghai in 2019. We established in 2018, and we have this first doctoral workshop in 2019, but due to the pandemic, so for the next 2 years we have to meet online, and this is our first episode of this kind of series of Dean's Dialogue with Deans series. So we're happy to have Dean Ginsberg to have this first episode. So now I will just pass to you, Dean Ginsberg.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for being here. As was mentioned, this is attached to the Global Education Deans Forum. Just a brief history of that. The idea comes from the genius, I think, of Dean Yuan at East China Normal University, who approached me with the idea of us putting together a collaborative of deans from around the world, from major research universities. We actually met in New York City to talk about it. And then the following year, we met in Shanghai in 2018, as was mentioned, met in Shanghai again in 2019. And sadly, the last 2 years, we've been forced to be online because of the pandemic. And then this year, the hope is to meet in Boston, Massachusetts, in the U.S. This current year. Perhaps we'll be back in China the year after. I hope so. Travel is, of course, a bit of an unknown. The idea of bringing this together was for us to bring together like-minded educators, deans of schools of education who focus on research, to see if there are ways that we could collaborate and share ideas and move education forward globally through the work across our universities. We developed 5 principles for the Global Education Deans Forum: learning, valuing diversity, collaboration, leadership, research, and advocacy, and building strong relationships. And we kind of sum that up into 3 distinct aims. We want to learn from one another, we want to lead on the education front, and we want to act. We want to make sure that things happen, and this is a great example, I think, of that. So I am very thankful to my colleague and partner, Dean Nguyen, at ECNU for bringing this together and then bringing this together as well. It's interesting, in these meetings over the years, we focused on a lot of issues, and we found that many of the issues in each of our countries, as different as we may be, are very similar. Issues, for example, around teacher education, issues around moving from research to policy and practice, looking at the impact of COVID, of course, looking at the impact of technology. I think many of your institutions in China are leading the way on artificial intelligence and going forward in the future. For this coming year, we're looking at the idea of focusing on well-being and the needs of all students in going forward. So lots of areas of commonality that we can focus on. At every one of our meetings, though, we get together and we get a chance to talk about really interesting and exciting things that we're doing that might be transferable to other universities. And perhaps I'll have a few minutes to talk about some things that we're doing at Kansas around teacher education in just a few minutes. I do want to frame what's happening in the United States, and I can only speak, obviously, from my context. There's a lot going on that's impacting us right now. Our political climate in the U.S. is just quite divisive right now, perhaps more so than it's ever been. Lots of turmoil in my country around vaccines and around mask mandates. The war in the Ukraine obviously is affecting economies all over the world. We have issues in my country dealing with race and diversity. Places are banning books. Some places are saying you shouldn't teach certain things and you should perhaps teach other things. And again, what I refer to as a COVID hangover is affecting all of us. Wouldn't it be grand if we were doing this face-to-face rather than online? But COVID has changed all the things. And, you know, what's the future going to hold? Will we have a global recession? None of us know that. And one of my fears out of all this is what will be not just people's capacity for change going forward, but their willingness to change going forward. In the United States, for example, we've backed away a little bit from mandates on masks and things like that. So everybody's just going out again, going out to restaurants, and a lot of teachers just want to get back to the way things were. And the question is that we've learned that we can change very rapidly through this pandemic. We've learned that we can do things much like we're doing right now through the use of technologies. The question is, what will be the willingness to change, or do people want to go back to the way we were? I don't have the answer to that. We could debate that perhaps someday. It would be a good argument. And I dare say I think that's probably true in all of our countries. We're all facing a lot of things. In the United States, the big issues in going back to school for students in the pre-kindergarten through high school was about what would it be like going back face-to-face? We did it mostly this year. I think for the most part, it went pretty well, but there were always startups and slowdowns because of COVID. I think that happened in your country, in China as well. Lots of challenges about do we go back to school full-time face-to-face? Do we do it in what we call hybrid, or some of it is face-to-face and some of it is online? Do we go back to fully online instruction? Many countries are talking about taking advantage of that and moving forward in the future. There were lots of disparities during the pandemic that we had already inherent in our country that got exacerbated. What do I mean? Not everybody in the United States had access to Wi-Fi, for example. If you don't have access to Wi-Fi, you couldn't be online taking classes. In the city of Los Angeles, just as an example, in the first year of the pandemic, they found they couldn't find 28% of the students. They weren't coming online. How were they going to find them? So issues like that, different groups in this country, in my country, the United States, were impacted differently in terms of illness, in terms of the economic crisis that ensued. Access to mental health services. A lot of people are really struggling with well-being. I don't know if that's the case in your country's big issue in the United States right now. One of the big issues we talk about now is what has been the learning loss that students have experienced because they went online or they didn't have any schooling at all. What were the safety nets that were built in there? Again, this issue of learning loss is a big deal. Some estimates said in the first year, students lost the equivalent of 5 months of learning in math and 4 months of learning in reading. I don't know if that's true or not, but this is the degree of loss that people were talking about. And much of the research dollars that we're getting from our federal government is focusing on how do we make up for the time that was the learning that might have been lost as a result of the pandemic. Big mental health issues for kids. Young kids I remember being in Shanghai at ECNU and walking across that park with the big lake and seeing kids with their families and all that. It was very, very heartwarming to me, and couldn't do that. You know, if you're locked in, you can't get out. And so what is that doing to young people? There are challenges for us for mental health for students. I think there were challenges for mental health for teachers and administrators as well. In one survey in the United States, 86% of teachers and 62% of administrators indicated that the morale was lower because of the pandemic. Certainly that has having an impact on us. It's having some impact on the number of people that want to go into teaching and as a career. Obviously, families were struck with the same issues that students and teachers were. So in the K-12 space, I would summarize by saying highly contentious situation because of COVID. Students are struggling with learning loss and stress and their motivation and energy for being in school. Certainly a highly stressful time for educators, teachers, and their families. Increased learning gaps because of the learning loss that I mentioned. And again, heightened mental health and what we call in our country socio-emotional learning dilemmas that people were facing. And the question is, what's next? And the answer is we're going to find out. Perhaps we're going to talk about it. Higher education level, much the same thing. Big financial constraints. There was a lot of money lost because when kids aren't going to school in the United States, as opposed to many other countries, I think including China, much of the money comes from tuition dollars that students pay and not so much from the government. So if students aren't coming and paying tuition, the losses were in the tens of millions of dollars to university after university after university. So how do you recoup that? And how do you make up for those kinds of losses? One estimate was that in the first year and a half of, or 2 years of the pandemic, losses to higher education in the United States were as high as $183 billion American. That's a huge amount of money. Education majors during this period declined by 10%. So the numbers going to teaching went down. Part of that was because I think teachers had to go to work if they were going to be face-to-face, in spite of the fact that kids might have had COVID and the like. Enrollment has declined in the United States since the pandemic started. From year to year, it's been going down about 2 to 3%. Overall, since the pandemic started in higher education, enrollment has declined in the United States 9.4% in higher education. That's a big number. And it may be because people are having trouble going back. Maybe they can't afford it. Maybe we're questioning the value of going into higher education. Hard to say. Faculty and staff are struggling with emotional issues. one of the great newspapers in our country is the New York Times. The New York Times used the word that people are languishing. They're just really struggling with what's happening. And I think that captures some of the issues that we've had in higher education. We've struggled with, what do you do with people on a tenure track in a research university? They can't go out and collect data. I mean, do you slow down their clock? Do you push them up? I mean, these are issues that I think we all face in higher education. 75% of faculty in universities reported some stress caused by the challenges of the new modes of teaching that were forced on them. Give you an example of what that meant. It was in March of 2020 that COVID hit. I remember that we learned about it, I think, on March 11th. I know that because my birthday is March 10th, so it's in my mind. And we had to go online the following Monday. That was a Tuesday or a Wednesday. We had a week to move everything online. Talk about having to change quickly. I'm sure you probably had something similar in your country that you dealt with, but this was certainly the same kind of thing all over the world. So lots of frustration and anxiety, big impact on students, especially. I really feel bad for so many of our students. They're not getting what for them was their expected college experience, where you come to a college and you might live in a dormitory, live on off campus and have that. And for so many students, that was taken away. So it changed not just the academics, but it changed the social side. And, you know, we get both academic and non-cognitive benefits of being in college. And that was challenging, and still is for so many students in higher education. Disparate impacts, much as I mentioned in the K-12 area. Again, what's next? I don't know. We all kind of hope the worst is over. We had a pretty good year, somewhat closer to normal, but I will tell you, we've started having lots more of our faculty and staff work remotely than they ever had in the past. Not as many people around, even though the students are here. Most recent data. This is from 2022, a survey of students from all over the United States. 30% of undergraduate baccalaureate degree students reported it was difficult or very difficult to stay enrolled. They were struggling with staying enrolled. 32% of bachelor's degree students reported that they considered stopping out, pulling out of college in the last 6 months. That's almost a third. 76% said the cause was emotional stress. So that's the most recent data that I've seen. So again, COVID issues, financial challenges, enrollment challenges, challenges to the workplace, students struggling with stress and anxiety, and the unknowns weigh really heavily on everybody. I'll close with this, and then I'm going to talk briefly about teacher education. The good, we learned that in higher education, we can change quickly, and we did. We went online, faculty learned about teaching in different ways. I think when we all go back to quote unquote normal, whatever that might be, we're all going to have a new bag of tricks of ways to work with students that we didn't have before. And we learned we can move online, and we can move online really quickly. The bad for me is as I mentioned earlier, I think there's going to be a big push to let's just go back to the way we were. And I think that would really hurt us if we don't take advantage. I mean, there's an old saying in the United States, there's always a little heaven in a disaster area. We've got to take something positive about what we've been through and use that for changing for the better going forward. And, you know, lots of financial losses, loss of programs. Some institutions will likely close. And the question remains, how long will it linger? In terms of teacher education, and I'll close with this, enrollments in teacher education are declining. During COVID, 19% of undergraduate teacher education programs and 11% of graduate programs indicated that they had experienced significant declines in student enrollment. Big numbers. Teachers learn, again, that they can adjust pretty quickly. Big focus on social emotional learning because of the well-being issues, although there are some issues in social emotional learning we could talk about. Big curricular impact in the United States because the laws that are changing about what you can teach in history and what you can't teach and things like that. We anticipate big shortages of teachers going forward. There's going to be probably all sorts of new licensure programs because we have such a so many people are leaving the profession. Big numbers are leaving the profession because of what they experience or retiring if they're capable to retire. We're worried about new programs that might not have the integrity that we might have at an ECNU or at a University of Kansas. The other thing we worry about is social media has become so dominant in our country, and I'm not sure it's quite the same in China, but in the United States, it's very wild. I mean, there's very few controls about what gets said. So, for example, 1/3 of our population still believes that the last presidential election was invalid. It's not true. It was done right. Why is that? Because social media plays up all of this stuff all of the time. So that's the context. We can talk. I look forward to the questions, and I can talk about some things going on at my university that might be interesting for all to think about. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dean Ginsberg. Within 15 minutes, you have already give us a very briefly, this is a context. And also, I think I shared a lot with you. For example, we have to, all of us, we have to move very quickly online, just within a week or 2 weeks. Yeah, we have to move everything online. And also this is a change and the challenges we just experienced in the last 2 months. So, and also we resonated with you about this kind of social media issues that's currently we see quite a lot of this educational hot issues being discussed over social media, and social media could push this educational issues, like recently in China, we have this kind of textbook issues or something like that. So I think we given this kind of pandemic context, I think we are have a lot of in common, and especially challenges and the changes to do. So now I think I'm inviting the students, Wonya Shu. Yeah. Interestingly, she is the member of our first doctoral workshop in 2019. So I think she will have some to share, and also you can have some questions for Dean Ginsberg. So Yashu, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Wonya Shu, and I'm a doctoral student of Educational Economics and Administration. And it has been a great honor indeed for me to be able to attend this meeting. 3 years ago, as my first year of Ph.D. studies, the 2019 Doctoral Student Research Fellowship Program of GEDF impressed me and inspired me in many aspects of my future studies. I was joined the group, which the research topic is learners and learnings, and we did some work in the education technology, which can support learners and learners' collaborative learning. And during the pandemic, I was always take this point of view to complete my online courses. And in those days, we cooperated with many doctoral students from all over the world, across countries and cultures. And I still remember the night that all the GEDF doctoral students went to the bund and have a really good time at the end of the day. And at that time, it's the GEDF brings me a clear view that the real-world problems often required the interdisciplinary approaches and teams that brought individuals from different specializations together. And the question that I want to pose to Mr. Ginsberg, as a success of GEDF, to what aspects that deans will pay more attention to promote the international collaboration of students in the future? Because as the pandemic continues to spread overseas, some of the exchange between universities around the world has been blocked. So I would like to pose these questions. Thank you, Mr. Ginsberg.
Yeah, thank you. And it's good to see you again, by the way.
Good to see you too.
I was able to work with some of the students, with Dr. Zhao and other colleagues. It is a struggle right now. You know, there's some talk about perhaps loosening up the borders so that more students can travel to different countries to pursue their studies wherever that may be. But It has made it exceedingly more difficult. But one of the things that we've all learned is if we could create avenues for students to work together, even online, or like we're doing now. I mean, isn't this remarkable that we're 13 hours apart? So it's evening here and early morning, I believe, for you in China. Yet we're having this wonderful discussion. And might there be possibility? Boy, he's good looking. Might there be possibilities for us to create possibilities for students to get together across country boundaries, outside of all coming to China or to Boston or wherever else it may be. One of the things you have to do is balance that with the fact, and Yashu, you know this, is you have to balance this with the fact that you're in a doctoral program and you need to pursue your studies to complete your work. But are there things? I mean, one of the ideas of this, when we were all talking about it, that was Bill McDermott and Dean Wen and Professor Fuji Yang and Dr. Zhao. One of the things we talked about is, are there ways we can create collaborations so that students can work on topics and bring the understanding from each of the different countries together in examining what that might be? Wouldn't that be a great thing for us to continue and perhaps, even strengthen what doctoral studies might be for students along the way? So I'm not sure exactly if that's answering your question, but I mean, you've hit on the reality that for the short term anyway, doing this is like we did it in China in 2019 is going to be impossible. So can we, as a group, and maybe Stanton Worthen is on, and Stanton has really done a marvelous job over the last 2 years of hosting the online GDFs through Boston, and hopefully we'll all be in Boston with Stanton in October. But this is maybe something, Stanton, that we can talk about going forward, is that this is a way we can build some exchanges for students and for faculty members to interact across. I hope that answers your question. I think that's what.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Mr. Ginsberg.
Yeah, and I think that this is also kind of this format. At least we can start from small. That is, we will have this kind of like this dialogue with deans. Then we will invite students and junior faculties from other schools of education to join this dialogue with other deans. So so next time we will invite students and junior faculty from Kansas to have dialogue with another dean. Then we will rotate. I think at least we can do this small by small, piece by piece. Yeah. So next, I would like to invite Dr. Zhu Gang. Yeah, he's associate professor at East China Normal University, and he was graduated from United States as well. So Professor Zhu, please go forward.
Okay, thanks for, I'm sorry, I increased my voice. Thanks for Chen's introduction, and thanks for Dr. Ginsberg's very fabulous presentation. Actually, I would like to share many points with you, but Dr. Ginsberg mentioned about the issue of teacher education, and I totally agree with your points on the political, social, and national context of educational reform during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we also want to look forward to the future education during the post-pandemic period. Nowadays, we often talk about the importance of teachers. Many studies demonstrate that a teacher is the most school-level variables that affect students' academic achievement. at the international level, many major international organizations such as UNESCO, OECD, and the World Bank, they often issue important policy recommendations for different nation states. When we look at these policy briefs, we often find that they hope teachers can become the social change agents for education system, and teachers, we can summarize that the teachers play a very important role in contemporary educational system. You also talk about the quality and the retention of teachers during this challenging period. Actually, we have a similar challenge in China, especially in some rural areas, because we find that it's very difficult to staff some low poverty schools in many western and middle region of China. And you also talk about the how can we improve teachers, like their quality, their core competency. Actually, I'm very interested in your perspective. We all know that University of Kansas is famous for its teacher education program. And in this scenario, could you please share some creative experiences from your program? Like how do you cultivate teacher, especially pre-service teachers, like their essential quality for flipped instruction or their research ability? How can they improve students social emotional learning and their psychological needs? So because we do not have enough experiences in this area, and I would like to exchange ideas with you. That's all. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm guessing you want me to respond, and I'll do that. Well, I mean, we're struggling with the same things as you are. There's no question about it. We did alter our curriculum in teacher education a while ago to have stronger focus on some of the social emotional kinds of issues that we've talked about. That was both before and during COVID. We're limited as to how much we can change because we have a government-based standards and accreditation kinds of standards that we have to follow. So you can't add all that much without taking certain things away, is all I guess I'm saying. But we have tried to do that. In terms of one of the things that we've tried to do, and this is one of the innovations, the main innovation I really want to talk about, is I think the best way to make future teachers feel the value and the importance of innovative approaches to teaching is to make them experience it as a part of their instruction. And so just the fact that so many students are taking classes online, much will be true of your students, much like it would be for ours. They'll tell you all the things they like and all the things they don't like. And they'll be very clear about it. We've got to learn from that, I think, going forward, so that we can apply the best practices. We started this before we had moved into the online space at my university a good while ago, and we had fairly all at the post-baccalaureate level, not undergraduate for us in education, but at the post-baccalaureate level, and we had moved to do that real quickly. We created a kind of like a, if you know the computer game or software SimCity, we created a city with schools, an online city with schools. We call it Jayhawkville. It's nothing like Kansas, but we called it where our nickname. And all of our online classes go in there, and within here, what they have are about 30 or 40 schools with videos of teachers teaching, with videos of principals, headmasters talking about their approaches. And we've populated each of the schools' websites with all sorts of data we actually drew from other schools all over the place. So it's not real, but it is real. So it's the student test scores, it's the parent teacher kind of. So we've created this so that when students are studying, they can do online, and through this online city that we created, they can do all sorts of case studies and different kinds of analyses, just as they would do were they actually in classrooms face to face with people. I mean, those are the kinds of things that you're forced into doing more and more and more. It's it's a form, if you will, of artificial intelligence. It's not really real powerful that way. One of the things we did in our program is we created something called a virtual learning network, and it uses an app. I'm not sure if you have this app available to you, but if not, I'll just explain what it does. But I'll tell you what it an app called Slack, SLACK. You may be familiar with Slack, and what we do is we require as a part of our classes that all the students become a part of this virtual learning network. And what we do is we have alumni of our program serving as mentors for students in the program through Slack. The app is, and the discussions on it are facilitated by practicing teachers. Within Slack, they have things called channels. So for new teachers who are moving into the field, one of the channels where they can go to get support and advice and share information is on social emotional learning. One is on use of technology. One is on classroom management. One is on working with students who have special needs, with disabilities and things like that. Again, facilitated by practicing teachers. It was a way for us not just to connect with the field electronically, but it was a great way for us to get our alumni connected with the current students, undergraduate students in our program. It's really powerful, and we require it of certain classes. We also can use it as a vehicle for providing professional learning or professional development for our students and for practicing teachers, and we use it for that all the time. So we many times get lots of people engaged in learning through this virtual learning network. So things like that not only provide ways for training and preparing, but also provide vehicles for people who are becoming teachers to understand how technology can be used. So when they get in the classroom, they can bring their experiences to teachers. That's the way I would describe it. It's kind of learning through doing. We've all been forced to do that a little bit, but we can do it better. We provide for our faculty here, we call it a summer camp, a summer getaway, where I pay faculty to come in and they just share all the things they've been doing with technology so they can learn from one another. And if somebody knows of a good app or a good software program or something, they bring it and they display it. We do bring in some experts that can help and bring in some other things. But this is what we have to do, I think, now, because this year, for these last few years, this used to all be face-to-face. We do it all online now. I mean, so many faculty members, and this would be true in the K-12 space as well, are really struggling with how to do online teaching well. Many of us, how do we engage students well? How do we engage students well if half of the students are sitting in front of us and half of them are online? One of the colleagues from GEDF, Stanton will remember this, the dean from University of Edinburgh in the UK, Richard Williams, I think his name is, Andrews, was talking about the level of technology that they have to make it possible for students to engage both those who are sitting face to face with those who are at home. But you need sophisticated technology to do it, and then you need to be taught how to do it to engage people in how you do things. That's, I think, the kind of, and I'll tell you, I think the GDF can do an awful lot for us to learn from one another, all of the little things that we're doing so we can do better. Stanton, you might remember that. I thought that was pretty powerful when Richard shared that.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
I totally agree with you, Dean Ginsberg. Yes, so I think that every member or every School of Education under GEDF has their own explorations and even those educational revolutions over technology. I think that our students, Yashu is also have a education technology. So Yashu, yeah, it's your turn. I think we just have this second round. I think that's all. Yeah. Yashu.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Ms. Ginsberg, and thanks, Professor Chen. as Professor Ginsberg mentioned before, I think the ranging pandemic has transformed our world in many aspects. Of course, the online lectures has the significant impact on our student life and also the teacher's life. And from a student perspective, I think teachers are the key figures in our student educational journey. And with the development of digital economy or under the impact of the pandemic, how institutions can make contribution so that the faculty can keep pace with the cutting-edge industry developments and refresh the expertise needed to tackle the global changes. Because in my opinion, that, for example, online lectures put forward higher requirements for teachers' digital literacy. So I will ask the questions. Thanks, Mr. Ginsberg.
Well, I think you're right. And I also think that we can learn an awful lot from our students, to be honest with you. They're many times more digitally sophisticated than the faculty who are teaching them. Certainly in social media, that's the case. I mean, I just would say reiterate what I said earlier is that I mean, we have to constantly have ongoing learning and opportunities for sharing different experiences and learning new technologies. I mean, that's one of the things I liked about GEDF. Stanton Worthen and I also meet with some other deans, research deans here in this country, and we hear discussions there as well about different kinds of technologies that you can use. At one of the meetings, they were using different kinds of cameras for the face-to-face group that followed the voice, so that we weren't aware about that. Many of us prior to that discussion. I will tell you though, I just started flying on airplanes again in this country for the first time, and one of the things that really surprised me is that almost nobody gets on planes wearing masks. The virus is still here. And so, I mean, in my country, we're not as big as China, but we get about 100,000 plus new cases a day. It's not the disease isn't as severe as it once was, but just think about that. Just a few months ago, everybody was wearing masks. Now everybody's getting on a mask, getting on planes without a mask, which means that a lot of people are going to get sick. What that tells me is that when we go back to schools, people are not going to want to wear masks. They're not going to want to behave. They're going to want to go back to the things that they were comfortable with. I mean, I think that would be a really sad occurrence if that comes to pass. But just watching the behavior of the people in my country, in my community, as I see it, a lot of people are acting as if the virus is gone, and it's not. And indeed, the percentage of people getting the disease is going up, although their severity is dramatically declined. But what that says to me is that if people want their lives back, wouldn't that be true of educators as well? Meaning they want to just get back to doing the things they used to do. And that's what we have to, I think those of us in the universities, that's what we have to fight against.
제 친구가 그림을 그립니다.
Yeah. Hi. Dean Worthen? Hi. Hello? Are you speaking?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes. Hi, thanks very much for organizing this event. I don't want to take much time, but I just wanted to thank you all. It's great to see Dean Ginsberg and all the colleagues from East China Normal, and it's wonderful to have this channel of communication.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dean Worthen. We are so looking forward to join the Boston meeting. Yeah, yes. Do you have any questions or comments? Yeah.
No, I think Rick did a very good job summarizing the situation here in the United States and some of the challenges. And it's interesting to hear that you have some similar challenges there in China. So I hope very much we can keep talking with each other and learn about things you've discovered that we could benefit from.
You know, one of the prior speakers Professor Genju was talking about rural communities.
Oh, yes.
In the United States, the Wi-Fi connectivity there is so bad that during the heart of COVID, what they were doing is they were driving sometimes 100 miles to get to some kind of commercial store. For us in this country, it was a big store called Walmart. Everybody has these big stores. You can buy anything at Walmart. They would go to the parking lots in Walmart because the parking lots Walmart had Wi-Fi connectivity. Everybody could drive through a parking lot, and that's the way they could go to school. You say some school districts were taking buses and putting kids on buses and driving to the parking lots so that they could get connectivity. Some churches were doing their services in the same way. Again, that's what people want to get away from. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We are finding that the big struggle for us in the teacher ed world, I think, is that because we've lost a lot of teachers and people would get sick and go home, the workload for teachers was really, really, really high. And teachers, like everybody else, have kids at home. When they went to work, if the kids weren't in school, who was going to take care of their children? And teachers had to go to work when others weren't, and it was frustrating. And let's face it, young kids were probably the biggest carriers of the virus, and teachers were being exposed every day. And so we're facing challenges there, and we also were at a point where a lot of people were getting near the way it works in our country. You can retire with your full benefits depending on which state you live in after a certain number of years. Not everybody retires at that point. Many work beyond that. What we're finding is many people are choosing to retire. So I'll just give you a quick example. My local school district here around the university, where you would think we would have lots of people available to go into teaching positions, the number of people that resigned from the school district went up, tripled, went up 300% this year over prior years. So people are resigning. They're saying we've had enough. It's a fear for the future. Dan, I don't know if you're finding that in the Boston general area, but big issue we're finding here.
Yeah. And I think even for the connectivity, even when I'm at home, just like a few moments ago, I lost the connectivity as well. So I think that's kind of something that we need to record and also to have this shared and studied. And Dr. Zhu Gang is also a researcher on teachers and teacher education. So Dr. Zhu, do you have anything to share about the China situation and any questions for Dean Ginsberg on this teacher issues?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Dr. Ginsberg. Thanks for sharing the virtual learning network example first, because I also focus on teacher education. Actually, when I studied in the United States, I always found the teacher attrition rate is quite high in many states, and we have to rely on many alternative certified teachers because it's very difficult to attract the more high quality teachers, especially in some urban schools or hard to staff schools in urban areas. I guess for many schools in suburban areas, they have many resources to cope with the challenging, the technology challenges, the COVID pandemic challenges. How do you predict the future teacher workforce in the United States? Is it possible that we need more alternative teachers? How do you perceive the differences between university-based teacher education programs and many alternative teacher programs? Yeah, so my question.
It's a wonderful question. Higher education probably will come up short in providing the number of teachers that will be needed going forward. I don't remember the percentage. I think higher education currently produces about 75 or 80% of the teachers in the country. The rest come from alternatives. I think there will be more alternatives. Just to give you an example, what was going on in the state of Kansas was they needed substitute teachers, and there was a shortage of substitute teachers. So they passed a policy for 1 year that they would allow anybody who was 18 years old and had a high school diploma, not college, had a high school diploma, to get a license to be a substitute teacher. That's the equivalent of hiring a babysitter. This is nobody that should be teaching advanced subjects. They certainly didn't know how to deal with young people in classrooms, but it was just because they just couldn't find humans to go into the classrooms to fill it up. Going forward, there's a number of forces at play. In about 2 years, the number of high school graduates available for college is going to hit a precipitous decline in the United States. So unless we can attract a larger portion of those who otherwise might not have gone to college to go to college, college enrollments will probably decline. So the question for us is going to be, will we be able to attract a larger percentage of the pie of those going to college to enter teaching? I don't see salaries going up dramatically. So it has to be about the work and the like. I think we have some significant challenges out in front of us. I do think there'll be multiple new alternatives. Some alternative paths to teaching are quite good. Some are not good at all. I fear the worst on that, to be honest with you, because but there are a lot of school districts in my state that are talking about taking this on their own. And in the past, when things like that happen, they get very excited and take it on, and then realize they don't have the capacity, the manpower, the personnel to do it well. And what you end up is with people not particularly well trained in the classroom. So I don't have the answer for that, other than I expect that we will have significant shortages going forward, because people in the workforce already are going to start to retire. And I think the numbers coming in will continue. They've been declining since about 2010 in teacher education in the United States. And I think we've been relatively flat at my university, but across the country, they've been declining. We're starting to see that as well. So it's a challenge. And you always have challenges in certain subjects. Hard to get people in math and science. They can earn more money. In other fields, it's very hard to get people for us in special education. But we're finding that we're running into shortages in most areas right now. The good news for any student wanting to become a teacher is the likelihood of you getting a job is pretty close to 100%. The sad thing, though, is that will we have enough people willing to go in? And that's this is something I meet with the deans in my state all the time. I meet with the people from our state. As a matter of fact, I just hosted a meeting for school districts, and whenever they were talking, the school districts are talking about what can they do to strengthen working conditions to make teaching more attractive for young people. And young people aren't going into teaching because they're not stupid. They see what teachers are having to go through, and they find it not particularly attractive. So how can we make the working, and that's the reason that people leave teaching, is working conditions. How can we make those working conditions more attractive? So I'm bolstered by the fact that these discussions are taking place. But if I were to be honest, I think we have some real challenges going forward all over the world, not just here.
Yes, definitely. Just recently in China, now we have this kind of graduate problem, and also we have this kind of shortage of teachers in the rural areas. So now we are having a new policy to recruit retired teachers to fulfill the positions in the distant regions. Yeah, so I think this is also kind of a challenge and issues that for GEDF could discuss about. Yeah, as the time is is very limited, I think we can have a very brief, very short questions for Dean Ginsberg. There is one question from the audience, that is, what role can citizenship education play in the post-COVID-19 world? What teachers can do? I think you can just have a very short response, Dean Ginsberg. Yeah.
That's a very tough one, and that'll differ by country. Right now, that's really challenging for us. In the United States, there's been significant issues, and you all follow the news around race in our country. There are states that are passing laws about what can be taught and can't be taught. So the answer around citizenship education and things like that is, as I think, an open question right now, and there's not an easy answer for that.
Yeah.
You know, we've been hosting a lot of lectures, and I know my colleague deans in the United States have about what does it mean to be a teacher living in a democracy, and what is it that you have to do to make people viable participants in our political culture here, and that will differ. We're all different, obviously, to do that. But I do think that character education or citizenship education training is always important. It's more important in my country now than perhaps it ever has been before, because we're so divided.
Yeah.
You know, there were just two recent decisions by our highest court that are going to make this around firearms and around abortion. I mean, it's going to make it. There was another one today, and it's going to make it more volatile around religion. I see there's another question about Slack. Let me just see if I can answer that. Is there an appraisal? And yeah, the nice thing about the app Slack is it has analytics, data analytics built in. Slack is a free app unless you want the analytics, then you have to pay for it. So we pay a prescription for that, and the analytics on it are phenomenal. And you can see how many times people go on, and you can see what the engagement was like and things like that. The answer to that is yes, and we do evaluate that, and we feed it back in to strengthen the training and the use of Slack.
Yeah. Thank you, Dean Ginsberg. Yes, I think that for the last 3 minutes, I will just take the privilege as being the moderator. That is, I would like to thank Dean Ginsberg as the first speaker for this episode. And I read from your webpage is about the mission and vision of School of Education and Human Sciences from University of Kansas. That is, besides preparing individuals to be leaders and practitioners in education and related human science fields, I was so impressed by the other two visions, that is expanding and the deepening understanding of education as a fundamental human endeavor, and helping society define and respond to its educational responsibilities and the challenges. Today, Dean Ginsberg himself speaks here about this kind of challenges, responsibilities, and also I can see he demonstrated this kind of really with his dialogue and presentation help us expand and deepen our understanding of the education as a kind of a human and our shared fundamental human endeavor. So it reminds us, and also as this kind of collision by this GEDF Global Education Deans Forum, that is, we should just as spring from this University of Kansas, that how can we either as junior faculties, senior faculties, and the students, and also deans among this network, that what we can do to help the whole society and the world to understand education as our fundamental and shared human endeavor. Yeah. Thank you, Dean Ginsberg, and also thank other deans and the audience joining our program today. Yeah, so we're looking forward to meet you again. I think that 2 months later, and then we will have student and faculty from Kansas, and then we will have another dean. Now we will just keep it, and we will review you later. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Dean Ginsberg. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank